for example, tying it together, I'm grateful that I'm a writer, and I wish for the opportunity to keep writing and write the best I can, and then have the courage to send it out to be published and wish that it will be published. But, that's sort of out of your control. You can only write the best book you can and do your best at sending it out to an agent, to an editor, to get it published, but you can't make them publish it, right? And of course, history is filled with legendarily great writers who got rejected majorly, right?
Everybody, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter, the Author Podcast. One of the places I love in this world is called New York City. If you've never been there, you have to go there. My guest is joining me from there today, and if you hear elements of the background, you might hear a little bit of New York, which I love. I'm already transported already. I can hear the horns and the sirens, and Gary's here with us. We're going to be talking about his journey as an author. He's got multiple books to talk about, a new one to talk about specifically today. I'm excited to have him on the show. He's got a lot of good stuff to share with you. Gary, welcome to the podcast. Glad to have you on Living the Next Chapter.
Thank you, sir. Happy to be here.
Excellent.
Happy to talk books.
I normally ask everybody, where are you joining me from? But we've already given that away. Where are you? You're in Manhattan right now? Is that where you are?
I'm in Manhattan, New York City, the Upper East Side. And horns and sirens are exactly what our listeners are going to be hearing for the next duration of our talk. It's a noisy ass city.
What do you love about New York? Like, why there? Why you could live anywhere? Why there?
Right. Well, I grew up in New Jersey, a stone's throw from New York. And of course, it pulled me like a magnet. Even as a child, I'd come with family to the city. Once I hit my wild adolescent years and then my even wilder teen years, I was coming in on my own and getting into all sorts of trouble. And that was in the bad old 70s, late 70s and early 80s. So the thrill of the decadent was what drew me initially. And the fact that it was so cosmopolitan and, growing up near New York, but not in New York, you really had the sense that you were not in the belly of the beast, but you were surrounding the beast and could plunge in at will. Though you never felt like you exhausted the amusements and the sins and everything back then. And when I reached an age where I was living on my own, I moved here. It was kind of a no-brainer. And though I've lived elsewhere over the years, I always come back here because it's familiar, I have to say, and also because, there's so much going on. Yeah. And friends are here and family, so it's sort of the kind of default place to live for me.
Yeah, I remember going down to visit my friends down there, and they'd be like, you can tell you're not from here. And I'm like, why? They're like, well, first of all, none of us walk with our noses in the air looking at the buildings, looking up all the time, and you're wearing a shirt that says, I love New York. Come on, man. You're just kind of showing everybody that you're not from here. But I love it. I just think it's an amazing place. The energy is just not something I'm used to from where I'm from. Yeah. And it's just addictive.
Since COVID, it's gotten a little rougher around the edges, which is good and bad. There's a little more crime and craziness than there had been. Yeah. But it's still really culturally rich, and you see the wildest stuff here. Sometimes not all good things, but the classic. There's an old photograph, I think from the 80s or the 70s, of a guy very calmly loading a sheep into the back of a New York City taxi cab. Very calmly, as if that was a very ordinary thing to do, and that kind of sums it up.
All right. Yeah. I do have to ask, do you own your own sheep, Gary, at all? No?
My wife is an animal lover and has threatened that we're someday going to have a farm with many animals. Okay. I will say, I was in Miami once. My wife and I were walking in a kind of nature preserve, and we saw a white bunny rabbit running around, and we thought, that can't be native to this preserve. It was about a week after Easter, and we figured it probably was a gift somebody got for Easter. Yeah. They didn't want to keep it, so they let it loose in this nature preserve, and it was probably not going to survive the night because a white bunny
No.
would be, you know, bait for any predator there. It wouldn't last. So we rescued it. We got it in a box. There was a ranger there who gave us a box, and we called some friends in Miami where we were visiting if they knew of anywhere anybody wanted to adopt a bunny. And no one did, but one dear friend of ours said at the end of his block was a Cuban woman who had a private animal menagerie. So we went over there and it was astounding. She didn't have alligators. She didn't have snakes, as I recall, but she had just about and she didn't have lions, but she had everything else. Enormous peacocks, and any number of animals wandering around together. And she already had lots of bunny rabbits and all kinds of exotic animals. And we just gave her the bunny and she let it loose, and it looked freaked out to be around all these crazy animals, and it made a home there.
Nice.
So I don't have my own sheep.
Okay.
But I have a dog, and the dog can behave like a sheep sometimes.
There you go.
So
did the bunny rabbit come
enough.
with candy as well? Did it come with candy? Was it like a 2 for no? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I like it. Okay, Gary. So for the authors that are listening to the show, I kind of like to start here with all my guests. I've got authors listening to this podcast, and they're just at the beginning of their journey of writing, and they're looking at someone like you, multiple books. You've done this. You've learned something in your journey as an author. Can we kind of talk to that author that's listening right now and encourage them on their journey? What would you like to say to them?
Well, a few simple, pithy phrases. First of all, a friend of mine who is a great author named Harry Crews, who wrote many, many books. He died about 12, 13 years ago. A wonderful author worth looking up. What's called a Southern Gothic writer, who was very, very decadent, and he would have loved 70s New York. Again, Harry Crews, Crews. Great book to get by him is called Classic Crews, which collects some of his novels, stories, essays. Harry used to say the best advice to a writer, a young writer, or any writer, is ass in chair.
Right.
Don't get out of the chair. And ideally, Harry didn't really live in the age of excessive cell phone distraction, but I'm sure Harry would have appended to that ass in chair and phone not within reach.
Yeah.
Right? And do it. I once was in the middle of a book that I finished, but I never tried to publish. I just didn't like it enough and wanted to do something else. I may go back to it. But in the middle of it, I was thinking of giving up. Just thinking this isn't working, I'm moving on. And this fellow, Harry, said to me, the middle of somewhere is no place to judge it from. Finish a first draft, put it aside, then look at it. So ass in chair includes, don't get out of the chair, metaphorically speaking, till you finish something, and then see. Then you've got a finished manuscript. You may choose to write something else. You may choose to edit it. And of course, editing is key.
Right.
You don't want to write something 20 times unless it really needs that. But you do want to rewrite it multiple times to get it to be as good as it can be before you send it out to agents and then publishers. You want to get it as good as it can be. And the way I do it, and the way most writers I know to do it, is to rewrite, to edit.
Yeah.
Do multiple drafts. That too is the ass in chair.
Right.
You have to stay there and do it. You don't want to talk about being a writer or working on this book as much as you do, nearly as much as you do, shutting up, sitting down, ass in chair, and getting to work and continuing to work, and make it a habit if you can.
Right.
I like to write first thing when I get up or soon after I get up. When I'm really burning, I'll write a lot of the day and, think about it when I'm taking a walk. Really get into the project, whether it's a story, an essay, or a novel.
Yeah.
So ass and chair is the first thing. The one other thing I would say is once you feel that you've finished something, you've done the best you could for now on a project, send it out. Send it to agents. If you don't have an agent, send it to magazines. If it's a story that you want an editor to consider publishing, send it out. Even if you don't think it's perfect, but if you think you've done your best on it for now, don't be shy. I made terrible decisions in my early years as a writer where I'd look at something and think, nobody would like this. So I put it on the shelf or put it in the closet and then start something else, and the process would begin. And as a result, I've got a lot of unpublished manuscripts, but I didn't have the faith to send the stuff out that ultimately I did, and that pays off. If you have a mentality of win, lose, or draw, I'm just going to send this out. I've finished it to the best of my ability for now, right? Maybe down the line, if you look at it with an editor, an agent, you will find things to improve.
Yeah.
But once you get it as pretty much as good as it can be, send it out. And finally, don't take rejection personally. If people, as inevitably will happen, agents say, not for me, editors say, not for me, next, keep going.
Yeah.
And, eventually, if you're passionate enough and you keep the ass in chair and you finish things and then you send them out, you will either get published or die trying. And at least if you die trying, you tried.
Right.
You gave it your best shot.
I like it. That's really good feedback.
Yeah.
I like that. That's good. That's a good start, because I think the other thing, a lot of the authors I talk to wrestle a lot with imposter syndrome. Like, there's so many authors out there. There's so many books. Who cares what I have to say, or who cares about my story, right? But the only person who can share your story is you. No one else can write your story. They can't even come close, right?
That's a wonderful observation or insight, and it's true. I remember in Brazil, I went to Brazil once, only once, and I met a woman, and I was unpublished, or barely published at the time, and I met this young woman, and I said, I'm a writer, not really published much, but published a few essays, and she said, are you as good a writer? Can you write like Jorge Amado, who's a great Brazilian writer? I've since read some Jorge Amado. He's kind of the big national writer of Brazil. And I remember feeling down. She wasn't a very literary person, so her asking that was sort of a basic question.
Yeah.
Can you write like Jorge Amado?
Yeah.
And I had to admit to her, no, I can't, right? But then it was a kind of amazing moment. To your point, I thought about it and I said, but Jorge Amado can't write like me.
Right.
Right? He might write better books. He might write more, get published and be a legendary writer. He may be far more experienced than I'll ever get and far more talented, but he can't tell the stories I can the way I tell them. And so that's really cool. If you get out of the zero-sum thinking I'm either great or I'm nothing, and you just say, I'm going to write myself. I'm going to write my stories, things I care about, and tell them my way, which is to say most naturally. Of course, you'll be influenced by the writers you've liked before, but you're still telling the stories. If you need not seek your own voice. You just need to tell the stories the best way you can. Again, then you send them out and win, lose, or draw.
Right.
And even if, worst case scenario, nobody ever publishes you, which is how it was looking for me for a long time, at least you gave it your shot and you had a lot of fun writing and being creative. And making these books, or stories or essays, poems that are you. And in a way, I know this is easy to say, and there's not a lot of money in publishing. The ultimate reward is, sure, it's great to see your book in print, but just to finish something and know you did a whole novel
Right.
or a really well-hewn story
Yeah.
or essay, and say, I did that, that's me, it really represents me. That's a pleasure in itself.
Right. Yeah. We're going to focus primarily today talking with you about I Wish, Therefore I Am, your book, but you also have other things to offer to readers. Can we just kind of give like an overview of some of the other works we
Sure.
have, and then let's jump into this book as well?
Yeah. Well, I began writing, doing journalism. I'd started as a criminal lawyer.
Wow.
And I did that part-time for many years. I was always writing and loved to write since childhood. Actually, it was that fellow I mentioned who was a sort of mentor to me, Harry Cruz, who, when he died, I wrote an essay about our friendship, which is online at the Paris Review. If you Google Harry Cruz Paris Review, it'll pop up. My name, Gary Lippman. And that essay about Harry was the first. I'd published some essays before and some stories in literary magazines, but that really got me keen on writing essays about cultural figures. So I did interviews and essays about cultural matters, mainly about literature. And then I ended up, I was always writing fiction. And I had a novel that I published in 2019, which has a long, kooky title. It's the title is Set the Controls for the Heart of Sharon Tate, which is a kind of twisted Hollywood novel about a guy who's obsessed with the actress Sharon Tate, who, of course, was this beautiful Hollywood icon or on her way to being an icon, who was tragically murdered by the minions of Charles Manson.
Right.
So that's a sort of dark, very dark novel with comic elements. 3 years later, I published a collection of one-sentence stories. I really wanted to react to doing a big novel. So during the pandemic lockdown, I began writing these very short stories and challenging myself to see if I could tell a whole story in one sentence.
Wow.
Yeah, and then when that came out about 3 years ago, and I then got started on a new novel, and that's my new book, I Wish, Therefore I Am. So, and the story collection was called We Loved the World But Could Not Stay.
Nice.
So the new novel, I originally thought I would keep up the long titles, but I decided to break that. And so this is a shorter title, I Wish, Therefore I Am, but it suits the book, which is a sort of book of wishes. Yeah.
All right. If you had a wish right now that could be granted to you, what's your wish? What would you want?
Excellent question. Well, of course, I'm going to go with my wish right now is for many more wishes.
There you go. Smart.
But keeping it to the literary, aside from health and happiness for myself and those I love, which I think is probably the best wish you could have, right? At least a kind of general coverall, wish. Or at least good health for myself and those I love. Happiness, you could, that's something you could try for, subsequently. But health is the root of everything, as we know, right? Good health. But with the book, I hope that people will pick it up and enjoy it, as many people as possible.
So,
Yeah.
as you listen to this, then let's make Gary's wishes come true, right? And buy your book, tell everybody, and buy many copies,
Thank you.
right?
Listeners,
See?
please make my wish come true. Read my book. Buy my book and
It's like
read
we
my
set
book.
all this up ahead of time. I like this. This is
Yeah,
good.
just to fulfill my wish.
All right, so talk to
You know,
the readers then, Gary. What are we going to get when we purchase I Wish Therefore I Am? Who's your audience? What's your message to that person who's going to buy this book? Let's talk to them before they open the cover of this book. What's your big wish?
okay. Well, I think the way I came to write the book, I'll get to the wish in a
Okay.
minute, but I was long an admirer of a book called I Remember by an artist, a visual artist from the 70s who died fairly young, a guy named Joe Brainerd. He was a New York artist. He lived in New York and was an adult here in the 60s and 70s. And he wrote a book that the great novelist Paul Auster championed. And Auster said that this guy, Joe Brainerd, had created his own genre of literature, which got my attention. And about 25 years ago, when Joe Brainerd's book, I Remember, was republished with an introduction by Paul Auster, who I admired, I picked up the book and fell in love with it. It's a book that is its own genre. It's very unique because it consists entirely of declarative statements, sometimes one sentence, sometimes a paragraph long, which begin always with the words, I remember. So it's a kind of non-chronological memoir where he just wrote down memories he had. I remember when my mother cooked me that really great chocolate souffle for my 5th birthday.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I kissed a girl.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I skinned my knee, And it isn't boring at all because a lot of the memories are pretty detailed and funny and kooky. And it's a delight to read because you just pick it up and start reading anywhere. So when I was thinking of what kind of book I wanted to follow my short story collection with, I thought about that. And then I thought, what a cool framework. I don't want to do I Remember. He did that already. But I thought, what could I do? And my first thought was, maybe a book of regrets. I regret. And that could be an interesting book, right?
Yeah.
I regret that I didn't kiss
Yeah.
X.
Yeah.
I regret that I did kiss Y, right? A lot of regrets of all sorts. But I thought, regrets kind of a downer, kind of too specific. And it might be interesting to do a book of regrets. But then I came up with the idea of wishes. And then my brain lit up and I thought, wow. A book of wishes, a wish is something that's really open-ended, right?
Yeah.
More than I remember, more than I regret, more than I want, even, I wish is really open-ended. You could say, I wish I had kissed X. I wish I had not kissed Y.
Yeah.
I wish for world peace. I wish. I realized it would be a vehicle to tell a lot of different kinds of stories, fantasies, memories, observations, anecdotes that I've heard from other people, For example, if someone told me a story about watching a sheep being loaded into a New York City taxi cab,
Yeah.
I could say, I wish I'd been there to witness that and then talk about it,
Yeah.
Now, that's not in my book, but that could be a wish.
Yeah.
So I realized that this format of wishes to my knowledge, had not been done before and seemed like a really cool vehicle by which to tell a lot of stories and memories. And so I came to think of the book as my kitchen sink book, because I could throw in everything but the kitchen sink.
Yeah.
Now I haven't. I edited and really only put in the best material. I wrote a lot of stuff I didn't include, which, by the way, for writers, beginning writers and all writers, is great advice to, write a lot.
Yeah.
And then when it's time to, as the old expression goes, kill your darlings.
Yeah.
Cut stuff, even great stuff, if it doesn't fit the project, So I cut a lot of stuff, A lot of wishes went, unpublished. And and I decided to weave in some characters. So I thought, who am I making the wishes? Who am I directing the wishes to? God? Well, God's kind of corny, and
Yeah.
if you're not religious, it might seem not to welcome the reader who's an atheist or whatever.
Yeah.
So I had long been fascinated by a medieval figure, a god or a supernatural being from the Middle Ages called Dame Fortune, who's the medieval European version of the goddess Fortuna, the goddess of fortune. So I wove Dame Fortune into the book as a character who appears and reappears in different guises throughout the book. And then I thought, well, who could be trying to thwart my wishes? And I came up with a band of evil ninjas who appear and reappear. So I've got Dame Fortune and these evil ninjas and all my wishes and recurring characters from my life and fantasies who come in, a lot of famous celebrities and historical figures, and a lot of quotations that I thought were meaningful about how to live life or how not to live life. So it really is a book filled to the brim with a lot of wishes and a lot of just fictional materials. So to answer your question finally, not only do I wish for readers to buy it and read it or even steal it if they have to, but I hope if they do get it in their hands and give it a look, they'll enjoy it.
Excellent. So let's just unpack the title a little bit more, because I wish, therefore I am. That's kind of an absolute statement right there. Like, how much does wishful living, wishful thinking, having that kind of wishful outlook on life, how much of that is you?
Well, I say in the book, I make two statements early on when I'm kind of setting up the book's format. I say that something like we're as composed of wishes as thoroughly as we're composed of water.
Oh, okay.
The idea, the idea being, what are we if not wishing machines? Wishing creatures. We're often, whether it's I wish something happened or something didn't happen. I wish something will happen or something will not happen, whether it's political, personal, sexual, romantic, social, philosophical, we're always wishing for things to be other than they are, though I mentioned there that maybe one of the deepest wishes is to, when powered by gratitude, wish for things to be as they are. Because maybe, the old expression, be careful what you wish for, right?
Yeah.
So, I examine in the book what wishes are and what we are as wishing creatures. So that's one statement, how important wishing is to us and to our natures as human beings. But I also talk about how you can know people by what they wish, right? Your wishes, which constitute a lot of your life and identity, are very different than mine, right?
Yeah.
As inevitably anybody. Now, you and I, as lovers of literature, probably have more wishes in common than, other people, but yet we're different people.
Right.
As men, rather than women or intergender people, we have specific wishes, perhaps,
Yeah.
For example, I wish I didn't have to go to the proctologist and get the proctology test, right? Which women don't wish.
Yeah.
They may wish they could watch us subjected to that. But wishes identify us as who our identity and our natures personally. So it's funny, the title of the book, I had different titles. And this title came to me when I was on the road. My wife and I were driving through South Carolina. And I called up my publisher and I was speaking to him about the book. And I said, so what do you think of the titles? I had, other titles. He said, great. He said, or what about, and then it just popped into my head, I wish, therefore I am, which does, it's pithy,
Yeah.
and it does, have a certain true, it truly represents the book.
Yeah.
So I just, my mind latched onto that and has stayed that way. Yeah.
Okay.
So I do believe I should say, Dave, that titles are
Yeah.
really important. I love a great title.
Right.
There was a book many years ago called A Man or The Man. And I thought, what a lame title, right?
Right.
It's just not like, the title is your way to hook the reader. It's your first and maybe only shot at getting the reader interested,
Yeah.
So, great titles are, I think an art in themselves, crafting a title that represents the book, the story, the essay, but which also is cool enough that the reader or potential reader sees it and thinks, wow, I wonder what that's about.
Yeah.
Then they pick up the book to see, and maybe you hook them with your description on the back of the book or blurbs or,
Yeah. The one thing I want to do is I kind of want to spin this around for a second and ask you what the opposite of this book is. Because if you're all talking about wish and hope and longing for things and putting things into the world that you are working your way towards, what would be the exact opposite of this book, and what would you title that book? Is it about the regrets? Is it maybe that one? But how would you title the complete opposite of this book?
Well, it's interesting what you mean by what could be meant by opposite, because, as I said, wishes are so open-ended.
Yeah.
You could wish, it could be a book of just negative wishes. I wish I hadn't done that. I wish that hadn't happened. I wish the presidential election went a different way.
Right.
I wish, you could do a negative version of that, but I do have a lot of negative wishes in the book as well as positive. I guess that could be one opposite. I guess to take your question very seriously, maybe a book, the opposite of it would be a book devoid of any aspiration or wishing, where somebody is completely unable to see beyond conditions exactly as they are,
Yeah.
And that raises an interesting philosophical point, if you don't mind me going a little.
I'm following. Let's go.
I mentioned in the book, there was a sage, an Indian sage, not a guru, but a teacher named Krishnamurti, who died many years ago, but a friend of mine studied with him, and he's published many books, and he's worth looking up. He's an interesting thinker. Again, Krishnamurti, spelled with a K, Krishnamurti, M-U-R-T-I, one word. And Krishnamurti was asked once, he had a very serene manner, apparently. I never met him or saw him speak, but a friend of mine did, studied with him. He had a very serene manner. And someone at a lecture once asked him very directly, why are you always so contented and peaceful and happy? And he ordinarily would not answer, they say, such a direct, obvious question. But that day he decided to answer it. And the answer he gave was very simple. And, when I've presented, I think in my book, I say it's the simplest answer possible, but perhaps the most difficult to practice. And what he answered was, I'm always happy or always contented because I don't mind whatever happens. And you realize, of course, that's practically impossible to live that way. It's practically impossible to live that way because, you lose a loved one, especially in a tragic accident or tragically young, you're going to mind, right? You're going to suffer. And there's no avoiding that. If you're a human being, you're going to suffer. There will be suffering. But Krishnamurti was saying that he didn't, basically, that attitude is the opposite of my book in that he wasn't wishing for anything to be other than what it was, because it was. So he really, lived, if he did in fact live that way, and I'm sure there were things that upset him, but I realized in hearing that quote, that's not a bad thing to shoot for, right?
Yeah.
We're going to mind things, but maybe mind them a little less, right? Especially if they're not major. So like if you have a fender bender and you're really upset, pissed off, etc., maybe a la Krishnamurti, you could say, well, I wasn't hurt.
Yeah.
Or I was slightly hurt. I certainly wasn't killed or majorly injured. It's going to cost money, but maybe my insurance will pay for some of it. Yeah, maybe my insurance rates will go out or whatever, but it wasn't the end of the world. It wasn't the end of my life.
Right.
And I'm just going to try and put it in perspective
Yeah.
and be grateful that things weren't worse. So, wishing for things to be other than they are all the time is a drag. You're going to be unhappy if you're always wishing for things you don't have or wishing for things not to be that you do have. But, and I even mentioned in the book early on to cover my ass, that, I'm happy the way I am. These wishes are just icing on the cake,
Yeah.
But I guess the opposite of my book, that's an excellent question and a very creative question. And I guess the answer would be to have a book of no wishes, to just be a static, contented person with things as they are, but you wouldn't be very human then.
Right. Yeah, and the underlying reason for asking that question in that context is maybe there's somebody who's feeling like they don't have any wishes, right? So they would recognize with the opposite of your book and how this book would actually be something that would draw them to maybe wishing more in their life.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't write it as in any way a self-help book for wishing, though you could. But I think that, if I were to write a book like that based on the experience of writing this one, I would say, wish as creatively and deeply and comprehensively as you want and can.
Yeah.
But try to take a look at what you've already got in your life, be grateful for that, and wish to appreciate that more.
Yeah.
I'll just add, I don't want to make this a thing about Krishnamurti, but one other thing that I've heard a few stories about him. In fact, in my one-sentence storybook, I tell a story about him that I'll save, which is a kind of comic story that my friend who studied with him told me. But recently I read there was a great English actor called Terence Stamp who was in some cool movies. He was in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and a great Steven Soderbergh film called The Limey. And a really wonderful actor who was very close with Krishnamurti. And I recently read Terence Stamp's memoir, and he mentions Krishnamurti. He said how he took a walk with Krishnamurti the first time he met him. And as a young man, full of himself and nervous being with this elderly Indian sage, Terence Stamp, when they took a walk in Rome, I think it was, they're taking a walk on the street. He's just babbling away about his life and his issues and his problems, and Krishnamurti listens closely. and doesn't respond. And then when Terence Stamp finally runs out of breath for a moment, Krishnamurti just gently puts his hand on Terence Stamp, the young actor's shoulder, and very gently, not condescendingly, motions to a tree, not even a very beautiful tree, that's near them, and says, "Look at that tree." So Terence Stamp looks it over, says, "Yeah." And Krishnamurti nods. They continue walking, and Terence Stamp resumes babbling. And, then toward the end of their walk, Krishnamurti stops again, looks up at the sky, and then motions and says, "Look at that cloud." And Terence Stamp goes, yeah, it's a nice cloud, And then they walk back to the dinner where they were with mutual friends, and they say goodbye. And Terence Stamp said only later did he realize the lesson Krishnamurti had given him, which is a truly deep lesson. Krishnamurti, I guess you could say, without spelling it out too explicitly, was inviting him out of his own mind and inviting him to pay attention, Terence Stamp, to his surroundings and to the world, and to look and pay attention. And in my book, I talk about that, about paying closer attention. That's a wish. And I think that's something to wish for, to more closely be aware of your surroundings, get out of your own head, and connect to the world around you more. That's something to be wished for, right?
Yeah, that's a whole new definition of wishful thinking.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I like it.
Yeah, but I think Krishnamurti, with that, I don't mind whatever happens, you could rephrase that as, I wish for things to be exactly as they are, and then you build from that.
And to be aware of it as well.
Right. Yeah. And, for example, tying it together, I'm grateful that I'm a writer.
Yeah.
And I wish for the opportunity to keep writing and write the best I can, and then have the courage to send it out to be published, and wish that it will be published. But, that's sort of out of your control. You can only write the best book you can and do your best at sending it out to an agent, to an editor, to get it published, but you can't make them publish it, right?
Right.
And of course, history is filled with legendarily great writers who got rejected majorly, right?
Right.
It's
amazing.
Eventually their time came. Yeah.
This is a great conversation, Gary. Like, I love how you unpack things and how you explain things and give context and stories. That's
a sign
of a
You're
good storyteller. I like that. Yeah, no, it's great.
Thank you.
Gary, let's talk about your website before we go. I know you got to run for dinner soon, but let's talk about your website. And I have one last question to wrap up our conversation.
Sure.
Where do you want to send the listener?
My website, Gary Lippman Official, GaryLippman, 2 P's, MAN, Gary Lippman Official, .com.
Yeah.
And all the social media under that name. And my new book, this book about wishing, I Wish Therefore I Am, just came out.
Excellent.
Last week, I believe. Yeah.
Congratulations. It's great. Okay, let's wrap up with this, Gary. In true fashion around the book and around our conversation, your wish for the listener as we leave. What's your wish? What do you want to leave for us?
Well, the great writer Jorge Luis Borges from Argentina, who's such a great, terrific writer, and his name is spelled Borges. He's a terrific writer who I recommend highly, along with Harry Cruz. And Borges had a great quote once. He said, "Read what you like, write what you must." Mm-hmm. So since our listeners are readers and writers, I guess I wish for them to do what Borges asked or advised. I wish for all of you that you get to read books and other things that you like and enjoy, and write what you must. Write stuff you're compelled to write, Of course, everybody has to write for money at times, or, make their nut, but to write what you're drawn to write. Once, for example, once I hit on this idea of writing about wishes in this format of wishing, I felt pretty compelled to write it and drawn to it. And I was like a dog with a bone. And so I hope the writers out there will find similar subjects or projects and go at it like dogs with bones.
There you go. Or bunny rabbits in a new environment, right? Go for it.
Right,
Chase
exactly.
it. I love it.
Exactly.
Gary, thank you so much for doing this, for being on the show.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Intriguing,
Thank you.
a very intriguing person to talk to. I love you're pulling quotes out of the air, and I'm like, wow, I just love it.
Well,
really
if you like that, the book is pretty similar. That with lots of quotes and speculations, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you, man.
Excellent. Everyone, as always, all the information for Gary in the show notes. Go click on the links. Go to his website. Not if, but when you buy Gary's books, please leave a great review. Gary, I'd love to hear your thoughts about his writings and what he's sharing. And you know somebody who's going to love this book as you listen to this. So buy an extra copy, send it to them as well, and share this episode with them so they can hear more about Gary and his writings. Gary Lippman, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. My pleasure. It was great. Thanks.
Hey, thank you so much again for pressing play. As you've heard, great guests on the show. And one thing you didn't hear in this conversation is what? What did you not hear? Think about it for a second. That's right. Not a single solitary commercial for a mattress or a supplement or a whatever you call it. No. Why? Because we don't want to break up the conversation with commercials. So the fact that you're still here means that you are a fan of the show, I'm assuming. So if you want to help to keep the podcast going and to make me feel really happy, all I really care about is coffee, okay? I just got to be honest. I love coffee. I'm drinking one right now. It's starting to get cold. I need to warm it up. Helping us with our Buy Me a Coffee link over at livingthenextchapter.com and also in the show notes helps kind of keep the lights on around here. Remember, I'm doing this for free. I'm paying for everything. So I would love to have a little coffee donation, even $5 kind of fills up my cup. And I would love to enjoy a coffee from you. So if you're interested, again, thank you for listening. But you can use our Buy Me a Coffee link and fill up the cup. Thanks for being here.